On the show this week, we have Ameera Shah, MD, Metropolis Healthcare Limited.
I actually think being a woman and knowing how to balance multiple personalities, how to handle people in a gentle way when necessary, handle people in a tougher way when necessary, actually very much helpful for my business.
And in news, Rory McIlroy has won the European Tour's race to Dubai for the second time. And Charlie Hopman ends a long drought and wins the OHL Classic.
Oh, beautiful tee off. Welcome to TeeTime, Ameera.
Thank you so much,
wonderful
Effie.
tee off.
Thank you.
For somebody who's just started playing the game, it's quite a lovely shot, I must say.
Thank you.
So let's start off really by talking about you as an entrepreneur. I mean, I want to tee off with this fact that we don't find too many women on the circuit in India incorporated. You are one of the few, and of course statistically proven, because I get most men on my show who are CEOs or managing directors. How tough it is for you to be out there in this world and be a woman and pursue what you really love.
Look, I think being an entrepreneur for anybody is hard, and I think in India especially, entrepreneurship is quite a journey, quite a challenge.
Right.
I think for women who are trying to be entrepreneurs, who are already entrepreneurs of businesses, it's a very different journey than what a man
Than being
goes
a man,
through.
right?
It's a very different journey.
Right.
At every step, a woman is actually finding herself dissuaded from doing or following entrepreneurship as a journey. And she's actually told that, why do you want to? What's the need? While a guy is usually given that encouragement that he should. So, from that, from somebody betting on you, from somebody investing in you, from somebody supporting you, becoming your first client, these are all very different challenges for a woman. Having said that, I think everything has pros and cons.
Right.
And I think the temperament of a woman, at least for me, the kind of business that I run, is a business of a lot of partnerships, is a business of bringing people together, consensus. And I actually think being a woman and knowing how to balance multiple personalities, how to handle people in a gentle way when necessary, handle people in a tougher way when necessary, actually very much helpful for my business.
Ameera, let's get back to your core business now, which is the diagnostic space. You are seeing an uptick in lifestyle diseases rather in this country. A lot of players like you stand to be benefited in urban India now that the stress levels are rising and consumers becoming a little more discerning, and prevention better than cure somewhere is taking center stage.
I think there is definitely a growth opportunity. I think the market, India as a country, of course, continues to grow. Hopefully, with our new government, there will be an even better change. We'll see. Healthcare in India is predominantly driven by private sector. Even though 70% of infrastructure is public and government owned, 70% of healthcare is taken care of by private healthcare. So, government, frankly, at this point has a smaller role to play in healthcare. And we haven't really seen a great amount of support coming from center or state level in promoting private healthcare, at least in diagnostics. Having said that, I think there is a big opportunity coming up in the future. I think the market has been growing well. I think it will continue growing for the next 10 years. I think the real challenge in this business is to grow it in a manner that is scalable, because services in India is anyway very challenging to grow. If you look at any of the services businesses which have scaled up, they usually, you think of IT. And usually those clients are international, they're not Indian. So if you look at domestic services, it's very challenging, because you have your, Kirana stores, where you have your Kirana labs, and you have in every industry, in hospital sector, you have nursing homes, which are these chotu things, where there is no minimum standard, there is no accreditation, there is no pricing policy. What happens behind the scenes, people actually don't know. Nobody has a clue. In our industry, for example, the urine test is called the sink test, because there are lots of labs who take the urine sample, pour it down the sink and give any result.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and because there's no standard. So what you do is really dependent on your own moral compass. If you are conscientious and you want to give and you think excellence is important like we do, we go and follow every rule, guideline, global SOP in the book, and we go and open ourselves up for global accreditation agencies to come and audit us. But if you don't have that moral compass and you say, look, I just want to make as much profit as I can, you will cut costs. That's your goal. You will take shortcuts. And in taking those shortcuts, the person whose result gets compromised is the patient.
Right.
And that patient and that doctor is dependent on the right diagnosis to then get the right treatment.
Correct.
So the entire cycle goes wrong.
Right.
And this is the biggest challenge that we are facing in diagnostics today, that people are comparing anything to anything and saying, "Arey, iska price ye hai, tumhara price ye hai."
So let's go with the cheaper one. Right?
And there's no knowledge of the fact that the cheaper one means this, the more expensive one means this. And there are people who, by the way, charge 5 times what we do,
Right.
and get away with it because nobody knows any better.
When do you think the PPP model will really kick off in this country?
The PPP model we've been talking about for years. I'll tell you the challenges of the PPP model.
Right.
So first of all, health is not a central subject in India, it's a state subject. Which
Right.
means, and usually PPPs have been driven by central level. Even if at the state level, not that other industries haven't had PPPs being driven, but for that usually the center or the planning commission, which no longer exists,
Right.
creates a model and gives it to the states and says that, listen, if you follow this model, there's actually a great way for the two of you, public and private, to get together.
Right.
The issue we're facing in services is, one, what happens to the employees who are already on the payroll? Question number one. They have their unions and those issues in the government. Question number two, today health is a cost center. It's not a profit center for the government.
Right.
So today, actually, if you go into government hospitals, they don't know their costs. So
Right.
if you ask them, look, I can go to a company and say, okay, look, your cost of cholesterol is, let's say, 50 rupees. It's costing you that much. I will partner with you and I will deliver this to the patient at X price. But you can only do that comparison if the government knows that their cost is 50.
Right.
Which they tend not to know because they don't do that kind of accounting and the kind of MIS that private
Right.
institutions do. So therefore, it's never able to move forward because pricing is a challenge. What are the minimum standards is a challenge.
Right.
Who is allowed to bid for something like this? Is it going to be like we talked about a Chota Kirana lab and
Right.
you're going to compete them with the global quality lab? So what is the standard? And lastly, what happens with the people? And I think these are the challenges.
Rather interesting conversation stirring up with Ameera Shah of Metropolis, India. We're going to stay in conversation with her and find out what their expansion strategy really is for this diagnostic change, whether they are planning an IPO soon or not, and whether there are any fundraising plans in the pipeline as well. All this and more on the other side. Stay tuned to ET Now. Thank you for staying with us on TeeTime and welcome back. We're still in conversation with the Managing Director of Metropolis India, and where we really left off was on their plans for expansion. Now, Ameera, Metropolis India is expanding quite steadily internationally, not just in India. You are seeing increased penetration in India is one thing. Internationally, you are out there making a mark in the diagnostic space as an Indian player as well. That brings me to a very pertinent question, that how is the fundraising taking place? Private equity picking up in this sector, but any plans of an IPO soon? Any plans of fundraising through the markets?
So we've already had a couple of private equity investors in Metropolis in the past.
Right.
Currently one. ICICI Ventures invested in Metropolis in 2006. They exited in
Sure.
2010. We've currently got Warburg Pincus as investors. IPO in my mind, the public issue, has always been the start of another journey, which is to be taken when you need money and when you want to be able to create some liquidity. At this point of time, to be honest with you, we are sitting on cash. Cash is not a challenge for us, thank God. Most companies don't have the privilege and benefit
Right.
of saying that.
Right.
So at this point of time, an IPO is not on the offering.
Right.
And we don't actually need funds, so fundraising is also not a thing. But our entire growth and expansion is being fueled by internal accruals.
Right.
And at some point, of course, if something very large comes up, a large acquisition, of course, we always there will be lines of funding available at that point.
So no plans of IPO on the anvil at all?
Yeah,
At
at this
all.
point now.
You spoke about internal accruals as well. What about the research and development spends? Do you plow back a certain percentage of your profit back into the business for R&D, because that will somewhere help you to bring in standardization, validation of technology, being able to provide the same services at maybe a lower cost, given the fact that you are investing heavily in technology as well?
So we do. We have a R&D department that spends all their time and a good deal of money in researching new technologies, new tests. These usually don't tend to be things which cut costs, but they usually tend to be things that advance diagnosis. We do 4,500 varieties of tests. And, this is for different diseases, different infections, different things. So our R&D is constantly trying to see how do we make each result better, more accurate, more efficient, quicker. So, that's where usually the attempt is made. On one place, we've actually researched and developed something in-house on TB. Because TB is a huge issue in India.
Right.
And the cost of diagnosis in TB is actually quite prohibitive for the good tests. So we've actually done a good amount of R&D to bring down the cost of the test there. And that's something that we're offering at a much lower price now. So that makes it more affordable and accessible to people.
All right, let's play Chip Shot and we continue our conversation. Now, there's also a huge correlation between the overall health of the country and the GDP growth of the country as well. And many reports have, over the years, made that correlation very successfully. Do you think that this is true, or would you beg to differ on this one?
I think, of course, as the GDP of the country grows, every industry and every sector will see some sort of a positive benefit. Healthcare sees it as well. People are making more money, people need to spend money. This is a need, it's not a want. And therefore, there will be higher consumption. Having said that, pathology is the one industry where we've been seeing prices reducing every year for the past 10 years.
Right.
We have not seen them necessarily increasing.
Right.
And actually, there are a few things that even today could happen which could reduce the prices further.
Right.
So, just to give you a simple example, the government taxes us between 25 to 35% on all reagents and chemicals that come into the country for testing, which is what we use to do the testing. And majority of our chemicals are imported. Now, the government doesn't ideally need to make money off this, because this is what, if your raw ingredient costs are higher, your output costs will be higher to the patient.
And you are passing the price increases to and the input to the prices to the end consumer.
Absolutely.
As well, right?
So that could be something that could change. There is, if there was some guidance in terms of screening of the good quality versus the bad quality done, I think it could remove a lot of the bad quality of things, which actually builds in risk into the system.
Right.
And that builds in a cost into the system.
Right.
So I think there are quite a few initiatives which can happen, which can take place. Price control is not an initiative, because price control is based on what price and who determines.
Interesting. So on that note, let's take a quick break right here on TeeTime. On the other side, we will stay in conversation with Ameera Shah and understand from her how viable is this space for startups and for young entrepreneurs as well, whether there exists a demand and market potential for entry-level players in this market as well. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us on TeeTime and welcome back. We're still talking about the diagnostic space, the healthcare segment, and now what we really want to focus on, Ameera, is the fact that there are a lot of entry players in the market that you're soon starting to witness in this country. Of course, they're private players. For young entrepreneurs, for people who are just starting out, how exciting is the space? How long before you operationally break even, and what is the gestation period before which you actually start seeing the light of the day in terms of profits as well in this space?
So I think it's definitely a good industry to grow in.
Right.
I think because there is growth to be had. I think the only tip I would give to new people who are entering the industry is, usually the way the industry works is medical education tends to be expensive in this country.
Right.
There are large donations to be given when people have to get the right seats.
Yeah.
So what happens is, students who are going to pathology, radiology will go and give large donations in medical college. And then once they come out with their degree, they then say, okay, let me start my own practice.
Right.
And that's when, they set up shop, they take debt, they buy equipment. And then they think, okay, now, how do I get business? And that's when the challenge comes in, because then they try to get business in any form and any color of any kind of practice. So the only tip I would like to say is that this business works keeping in mind if healthcare is a passion. And your focus is always on the patient being first, and the diagnosis being accurate and the service being good. And that's the reason to get into the industry. It's not quick money. industry at all. It's not an industry in which you can make quick profits. It's a long gestation business. You have to sow your seeds in, and you have to wait, and you have to toil, and you have to work hard before which you can actually see profits coming in. The good news is that the industry is so challenging to get into that it's equally challenging to break the business. So it's one of those businesses that takes time to build, but it's not a business which is, because the barriers to entry are high, it's not a business which crashes easily.
And there is a large untapped market right there, right? Because 70% of India is rural and still remains untapped. So huge demand potential which still hasn't come anyone's way as yet. Would you agree with me?
Yes and no. I think there is a potential from the point of view of, people say, oh, so many hundreds of millions of people and they need diagnosis, etc. Today, if you want to do things in a high quality way as a corporate chain, it's challenging to get into rural India because dynamics are so different than they are in urban India that making your costs feasible on a rural market basis is very challenging. So today we've gone into tier 3, tier 4 towns. We've even gone to village level. And the dynamics and the costings are completely varied from what they are in urban India. So it's like redeveloping a completely different business model. It's not an extension of your existing one. It's like how people did banking in urban and then microfinance in rural.
Yeah.
You've got to innovate a new business model completely. We've actually created a different format for smaller towns where your capex is lower, your operating costs are lower, your returns expectation are later. But you re-engineer the model, hire people at different salaries.
So what did you do in terms of your education really? Is this what you always wanted to do? Is there a specific degree that you got in your favor before you
not really
embarked upon this journey?
I did my finance as a background. For me, really, the two things that were driving me is, one, I'm very patriotic about India. And in 2001, when I had a choice between staying in the US and continuing to grow in large investment banks there and join companies there, I decided to come back to India because for me, my country is my home, always has been, and I really, my future goal is to be able to contribute back in as many ways as I can. And I always said, look, if I'm going to do anything in my life, if I want to be successful, I would rather do it for my people in my hometown where I'm building and contributing to my country. So that was my driving factor to come back. And I think business really is less about qualification and education, but I think more about your emotional quotient, your common sense, how you balance your rational and logical thought with your emotional quotient, and how you manage to build something with people around you. To me, business is more about that than it is about a certain degree or a certain qualification. I think the opportunity was right. India was at a good time. Clearly there was some vision of what this could be. And I started in 2001, and fortunately we're from one lab to 800 centers today in 7 countries. And
rest, as they say, is history, definitely.
Yeah,
now,
absolutely.
what is the next big thing that you're looking forward to in your career as well? Of course, I know about the incubator program for women that you're building, that you're deeply passionate about. But in terms of Metropolis, in terms of the healthcare segment, in terms of what next for Ameera in her career?
So, Metropolis will continue growing.
Right.
I've built the company in a way now where it's strong with or without me, and I think that's very necessary.
Autopilot mode.
I won't say completely autopilot. It still requires steering.
Right.
But it's the day-to-day is on autopilot. It requires me more for strategic goal making for the future and building the strategic aspects of the business. I'm sure in the next 3 to 4 years we'll be a $1 billion valuation. So I'm quite comfortable in the direction Metropolis is going. Where I would like to really contribute as far as healthcare goes, I would like to innovate a new model for rural India, re-engineer a new format that's viable for rural India. We're doing some experiments now, some of them are working, some not so well, but that's something that I would like to make an impact on the industry. I also have a hope that we'd be able to build a business model where, like I was telling you, US charges 10 times the amount than India. I see absolutely no reason why a blood sample can't be shipped from the US or Europe to India for testing and give results in 24 hours.
Become sort of a back office.
Become a back-end referral lab of the world.
Right.
There's absolutely nothing stopping us. We follow global qualities.
Absolutely.
So I think there's definitely a possibility for that. I think we need to, my first goal is to become the premier chain across emerging market space, across India, Sri Lanka, Middle East and Africa. We're already in these markets and I want to continue building that. Number 2 would be to go to rural India. And number 3 would be to look at the international markets and look at India as a back-end referral hub for the international markets. And I think that should keep me busy for quite a few years.
That's lovely. That's as a woman, you've achieved really quite a lot and great vision and a brilliant pursuit that you're following in life as well. What about sport, Ameera? Now, you've been playing golf a little bit here and there. You're practicing a little bit here and there. But when do you plan to take it up professionally? Sorry, in a much structured manner, rather.
So, golf to me has always been one of those sports, and a lot of my friends who play golf tell me I'm sorely mistaken about this. But it's always been one of those sports I feel like, when I'm out of physical energy, I'll do it then.
Right.
But just from today's shoot, I can tell you.
But it's anything but
it's anything
that,
But yeah, I mean, tennis is my favorite game. I try to play a couple of times a week. I play pretty much every sport. I love sports. I love the outdoors. The sun makes me very happy, not on a day that's so hot, but normally. So anything outdoors, trekking, mountaineering, climbing, sailing, volleyball, every sport I enjoy. And hopefully maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, as I have more time, maybe structured golf.
All right, so come, let's finish our game.
All right.
Come. So Ameera, on a winding note, let's hear out some inspirational words for you for the young women entrepreneurs who are here to make it hopefully as big as you do.
So I heard a quote once which I really like, which basically said, I'm paraphrasing, which was keep trying, keep failing,
right,
and try better. And I really liked that because it tells you that pretty much nothing is possible without keeping on pursuing and persisting. I think for all women entrepreneurs out there, I think the goal is, while we realize that the challenges are different and the journey is different, never to make those challenges in a journey an excuse not to be able to do what you really want to do.
Lovely.
Because otherwise, that becomes a justification for not doing things.
Well said. More power to you, Ameera. Thank you so much for joining me right here on TeeTime. It was lovely interacting with you today on the green. With that, it's a wrap from me, Chaiti Narula, on TeeTime. I will see you same place, same time next week again. Until then, as cliched as I may always sound, may the sport be with you.